What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be covering my Invoked Shaddoll list that I've been, featured in previous combo videos and in that match video that I posted the other day. Overall, this deck is really cool. Been very excited to play test this deck. This is one of the decks that I think has been slept on a long time. I'm honestly surprised a little bit that it took this card being released for this deck to gain popularity. I know that it won like a big European tournament like a week before this structure deck came out, but clearly someone realized how powerful these Shaddoll cards were. Even without the new wave of support, even while we're still in Master Rule 4, this deck pops off super hard, recurs advantage super well, floats really well, is really hard to deal with. And overall, I think it's like one of a really strong pick going into this next format. Starting off with our main deck, we have 3 copies of Ray Shaddoll Wendy. Now this card is really good. Like I said, the deck doesn't necessarily need it, but oh boy, does this raise the ceiling on all of your plays. This is by far the best Shaddoll monster. Just the fact that like you can set any Shaddoll from deck, fuels your fusion plays. Proccing this during your opponent's turn with an El Shaddoll fusion is really powerful. Allows you to set cards like Beast to your side of the field, making it so your opponent has to work hard to clear your resources. Otherwise you're going to go plus on them for free, which is honestly really cool. So overall, just a fantastic inclusion to the deck. Nice that it's an element besides dark as well, because you get to go on some other stuff. We also got App Cologne, which as a new card, which this card synergizes very well with as well, giving you other opportunities to go into those extra deck monsters without using monster from your extra deck to go into it. But overall, it does suck that it is a wind attribute. Like if it was any other attribute, this card would be like absolutely snapped in half. And Earth, you make Grista, or Earth, you make Shekanaga with it. Fire, you make Grista. Like both of those cards have a lot more relevant effects. Even Water, to make Anoya Tillis is more relevant than the Winda, unfortunately, or the Wendigo. Wendigo, I believe the Earth one is, or not the Earth one, but the Wind one is. But overall, probably good that it's not, because this deck would be even more busted. Moving on to the lower Shaddoll counts, we play 2 copies of Squamata, 2 copies of Hedgehog, and 2 copies of Beast. All of these are like consistency Shaddoll cards. Any of them are good to see in your opening hand. Searches out any copy of any Shaddoll card that you don't have. Typically, if at the beginning of your turn you don't have access to Wendy, it's searching that. Beast, you're going to set multiple during the game, so it's like the 2 count is definitely warranted. And Squamata is honestly pretty good. I've been trying to find room to bump up Squamata to 3, but it's been pretty hard because I've been wanting to play all of these engines. But all of these add a lot of consistency to this deck, which this deck needs. Continuing on to the 1-of Shaddolls, we have 1 Shaddoll Ariel, 1 Shaddoll Dragon, and 1 Shaddoll Falco. I think this card might be close to being cut from the deck. Like, it's cool that you can flip it up and then reset a card like Dragon during your opponent's turn, or during your turn to like get an additional plus, or reset a Wendy to extend further, and it extends further on its own. But overall, like, it seems kind of lackluster. Like, it might be better just to see have an extra Squamata in the deck, just so you see Squamata more often. Because drawing this card isn't that good, while drawing Squamata is really good. This might be close to the chopping block. Depending on your matchups that you're playing against, like at your locals in particular, you can side in additional copies of this, play more as you need it, because it does have 2 very relevant effects. The fact that you can like pop a card during your opponent's turn is really strong. If you have the trap in grave and you like drew it or something, you can set up the Shaddoll. If you want to use its effect to bounce a card on your opponent's field back to their hand, is also very powerful as a good stun effect. And this card pairs really well with the trap card, which allows you to extend super hard with like reviving back fusion monsters from your banished pile. So this card is really cool as well. Also, in a lot of mirror matches, the effect on Send to Grave is actually really strong as well, because you get to banish all of your opponent's resources, or like set up any kind of banish play that you want to do. Continuing on, we play the Damage Juggler engine, 3 copies of Perform Mage Damage Juggler, 1 Hat Tricker, and 1 Trick Clown. Now these cards are really cool. They're actually really fantastic. The extra deck space wasn't as tight as it is. I'd probably consider bumping up Hat Tricker, because there's a lot of combos where if you open like your standard card, 3 cards plus a Hat Tricker, you can go into Abyss Dweller on top of everything else, which can be very difficult for any like Spiral decks, Dinosaur decks. Everything in the format has a hard time dealing with Abyss Dweller. And your deck floats really well, so that ability to buy yourself 1 turn in OTK is super powerful, but it's really difficult to find room in this extra deck. Like, I haven't even got it pinned down to 15 cards that I feel like I would be willing to take to an event. But overall, this serves as your main light for the deck. Allows you to fuel like multiple summons in a turn, allows you to summon multiple lights in a turn. And really, like, with the amount, maybe three of this is a little too much with the Invoked engine as well. But if you're not planning on playing Invoked because they're a little too pricey, this engine is really, really good, and I definitely would highly encourage playing it. Continuing on, we have some hand traps. 3 copies of Psy-Frame Gamma paired with the 1 driver, because these are all light type monsters, so they have good synergy. Gamma stops a lot of boards completely outright, and then 1 copy of Ghost Ogre. As you'll see later, I'm playing 1 copy of Emergency Teleport in the deck as the 4th copy of Windy, and in hands where you already see the Windy, this can turn into an alternate piece of disruption through a Ghost Ogre. Or it could just be an extender, like say you have the Ogre in hand. You can also summon these out from deck if you need like just the light monster to start fusion summoning. So overall, these are the targets I went with because of that, because of their attributes, because of their types, and because of their relevancy in the format. Continuing on to the, unfortunately, probably one of the best parts of this deck, despite how outrageously expensive it is right now. But 3 copies of Alistair the Invoker, 3 copies of Magical Meltdown, and 3 copies of Invocation. There is the only instance in where this deck really bricks is if it doesn't see a fusion spell. And because of that, this engine is almost paramount to the success of this archetype at the moment. There's other builds that you can play as well. I've been messing around with a more budget-friendly version, playing like actual polymerizations in it with like fusion recycler plants, because it allows you to recycle your resources for free while searching your polys out of your deck and recycling your polys back, which is really useful. Not sure if it makes the cut yet. I might go the route with the budget build that the guy who actually got 2nd place with a Invoked Shaddoll deck did, and just play a ton of draw spells, so you can just like turbo into your your El Shaddoll fusions as quick as possible. But that unfortunately means that we get to play a little bit less tech in the deck to increase our consistency. But with these cards in the deck, like, you don't really have to flex on that at all. Like, you can still play hand traps, you can still play like other cards. Gamma going first is good, because if they gamma either of these, or they draw either of these, you get to make it gamma and you get free link fodder from that. And we do play the Lambda in the extra deck, so if you have multiple copies of a Gamma in hand, they're not dead, which is really cool. But overall, having 9 copies essentially of a searchable polymerization really makes this deck fantastic. That, coupled with this card giving you access to like the entire Invoked suite of extra deck monsters, is really strong. I can't understate how good this engine is. I don't think it's necessary if like you want to play at like a local level, maybe even a regional level, without this engine. Like, you could probably get away with it. But if you're going to like a YCS or something bigger and you want to play Shaddolls, I think this is definitely the way to do it. Unless you found like another spicy deck, like maybe a zombie Shaddoll list might sneak in there every once in a while, because the ability to just dump Balderrock from deck with Shaddoll fusion is actually kind of crazy. But continuing on, we have our main Shaddoll fusion spells: 3 Shaddoll fusion and 3 El Shaddoll fusion. Man, both these cards are really good. Shaddoll fusion, like, obviously, like, if your opponent has an extra deck monster, this card is so plus. But El Shaddoll fusion is actually nuts for securing your plays. Like, just the fact that when your opponent attempts to clear your window, you can activate this card and then just put another one on the board and go plus like 2 off of that, add this back off of the window that probably just got outed, like everything. Oh my gosh, I can't understate how good this card is, because it allows you to trigger all of your effects on your opponent's turn, or alternatively, when your opponent activates an effect that would special summon a monster and you chain El Shaddoll fusion to it, like, it can just turn off their turn almost completely. So overall, I understand why this card was limited, because it's pretty insane. Also, just giving you OTK potential. Like, this card literally does everything that this deck needs it to do. Like, it's a fusion spell, it's a quick play, allows for interruptions on your opponent's turn, lets you float resources on both players' turn, and is overall fantastic. No question that the regular Shaddoll fusion is really good, but it's a little more situational. But because of how our deck plays, we have to see a fusion card, so we're maxing out on 3 of each copy. And then the last 2 spells in the deck, I showed one a little bit earlier. 1 emergency teleport, and 1 foolish burial. These are essentially like the 4th and 5th copies of every single card in the deck. Foolish dumps any Shaddoll monster that you haven't activated this turn that you might need to get beneficial value out of. Emergency teleport acts as like additional hand trap interruption, acts as additional Wendy's. So it's like a consistency booster for the deck. It also gives you additional link materials if you need that. Overall, both these cards are really good. And then the last card in the main deck, we have 1 Res Shaddoll Incarnation. This card has a ton of cool plays. If you guys checked out other videos on the channel, this card allows Shaddolls to pop off super hard by flipping up your Shaddoll during your turn, so that you're not ending on just Winda with a little bit of protection pass, like you're ending up on like a ton of cards. So overall, that was the main deck. Jumping into the extra deck, we got our tokens, unabashedly unashamed to show these off. I love these tokens so much. Moving on, we have our 2 Construct, our 2 Winda, our 1 Apkalone, and these make up our entire Shaddoll Fusion package. It's so hard to play fusion cards. Like any extra deck that's forced to play fusions, like it's really hard to fit them in. Like I really want a 2nd Apkalone sometimes, like I really want a 3rd Construct a good amount of times, and it's so difficult to find space, especially if you're playing the Alistair engine, because it means that you're playing like 3 to 4 invoked fusion monsters as well, and then there's a ton of link monsters that give your board protection that you need because you need to secure your window during your opponent's turn. So overall, I think the hardest part of this deck to make is actually getting the extra deck down to 15 cards that you feel really strongly about. It's a little bit easier in the pure version because you don't have the invoked cards, and the invoked have a good amount of engine requirement, so we'll just move on to those. Next, these are the cards that I am rock solid on for our invoked engine. We have our 2 copies of Mechaba, 1 copy of Purgatrio. Like this allows you to just pivot, kill your opponent out of nowhere. It's kind of hard to out. Mechaba, like the cornerstone of the invoked engine. Our construct generates the light that we need for Mechaba too, so like the synergy there is just fantastic. I'm also playing, I'll show a little bit later, there's a few cards that I'm on the fence about because like I said, like it's really hard to find space in this deck. I currently have 17 cards that I want to play, and you're only allowed to play 15 in your extra deck. But there's also Invoked Ragin. This card is also really good because Wendy is a wind, so like it has good synergy with this card. There's also like good plays that you can do with this card if your opponent makes the Appaloosa Winda board against you, and it can be a little bit difficult to out. But if you activate a fusion card, or an invoked fusion or invocation using this and like a bunch of cards from graveyard because your opponent broke your board and then established theirs but they couldn't kill you or something, you can make the invoked Raijin. And if you have Magical Meltdown up at the resolution when Raijin was summoned, you can actually activate Raijin's effect to book their Winda, turning it off for the turn, and your opponent can't respond with their Appaloosa in response, because Meltdown says if a card is fusion summoned this way, your opponent cannot activate their effects. So during the window after the fusion summon resolves, you are able to activate your effects of your fusion monsters like basically for free, which is really cool. And there's some cool interactions like that with Raijin where you get to activate it the moment it's summoned, and it gets you a ton of value because your opponent can't really respond to it. But overall, these are the invoked cards. Like I said, little on the fence about Raijin. These are all really good. You definitely have to play 2 Mechaba. This card's really cool. The invoked engine overall is really good. Moving on into our links, we have All Mirage for our Alistair. Gets it off the board, gets our materials started for the plays that we need without being overly wasteful with our stuff. And this is another card that I think could fill the 15th slot, is the Secure Gardener, because you get to link this off into Secure Gardener to make your light for the turn. So if you didn't open a light, then you still have access to lights to be able to make like a really strong play. I'm on the fence about it only because this main deck is playing such a high count of lights. I believe the total amount is 9, so you're not always going to need to be able to go into a Secure Gardener. It's like really good, and it definitely like you're forced to play it in like the builds where you're really slim on your lights, because it's just like probably the most consistent light that you can have access to in those regards. Because if you see Alistair, you have a light for your construct place, which is really good. But like I said, we have a high light count in this deck, so I'm on the fence on it. But other than that, we have Cross Sheep, Alistair Madness, or Alistair the Invoker of Madness, and Cyframe Lambda as our Link 2s. All of these cards are really good. This card is kind of iffy. Like, you can cut the Gamma package for other hand traps potentially, but the problem is I don't actually own an Appaloosa. I might play an Appaloosa in the spot instead, but ending Avermax Winda Makaba is like really difficult to out. Like, because a lot of the time, like, people can just go into battle and like kill your thing, right? Or try to attack over your Winda. Most of the time Appaloosa can prevent that, but you know, your Avermax is going to basically say, no, you're not allowed to attack my Winda, period, which is just really strong. And this is the best generic Link 2 that you make during that choke point, or during that combo sequence, to go up into Avermax. So I think he warrants his spot, especially since it allows you to play Gammas during your opponent's turn when you've already built up your board. This card is insane. Oh my god. Not having a once per turn clause to search fusion spells is actually insane. I believe this, does this discard for cost? No, this doesn't discard for cost either. This discards for effect, which means that it triggers every single one of your Shaddoll cards, which is pretty nuts. And I don't think I have to tell you how good Cross Sheep is. Like, this facilitates a lot of your combos, and just keeps your cycling going with all of your free resources. And then this brings up the last of the cards potentially on the trot, like as the 17th slot, Shaddoll Construct. These two cards pair really well together because it's really easy to make this card after you make Cross Sheep, because it will special summon back a flip monster to your board. You can summon Construct, and in the hands where you don't open Alistair, this card is actually really good for allowing you to establish boards and allow you to establish advantage for the follow-up turns. So like I said, this might make it in, but it's still very iffy. I think I'll get to them later. And like I said, the one copy of Avermax, securing your plays, locking it down, and then the one Boral Sword Dragon, because, oh man, nothing says you GG like a Boral Sword Dragon with a double Makaba Construct underneath it. Man, both of these cards are really fantastic. I think this deck can summon enough monsters to warrant, like, to allow you to play 2 Link 4s, even though the extra deck space is so tight. And like I said, these are the 3 cards that I was heavily considering, but I was on the fence on. I think I'm leaning towards Security Gardener the most, just because it adds the most consistency to the deck in terms of what I want to be able to do on my turn. Having access to the light is just super important, but I could see good justifications for playing any of these cards. That being said, let me know what you guys think down below. What builds of Shaddolls you guys might be running. I mean, I'm really excited about this deck. I've been like trying to make Shaddoll Dino work. It's a little bit iffy. It's hard to justify playing Shaddoll Dino when the True King build is so fantastic right now. But that was the build that I was playing before I adopted True Kings. And I think that there's some cool shenanigans you might be able to do since Wendy came out. But that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. It's been Underclock here, and I'll see you next time.